Okay, good morning. I don't have a gavel, my TACC gavel. You know.
And I don't know how the directional microphones work, so let's make sure we speak up.
Oh, yeah, because I have a problem with projection.
Maybe that wasn't directional.
Yeah, voice folks, we'll make sure that the folks online and the general public can hear us. So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Transportation Authority of Calhoun County Board Workshop for July 8th, 2025. And Madam Secretary, if you wouldn't mind doing roll call, please.
Okay, we have Janisha here, Maya here, Eric,
Present.
Tom
Here.
Amy here, Vivian here, and Paul here, all present. Very involved group.
Well, thank you, Vivian. I don't know what we did to be involved so early, but let's keep up that progressive work. We need approval of the agenda. So moved, sir. Moved and supported. Any other discussion? Any additions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. Our business at hand today is kind of discussing fairs and service areas and what have you. Mallory will take us through some of the assumptions we've had up to this point, maybe give a little bit of history. Am I correct in assuming that, Mallory?
Yep.
Give a little bit of history of how we got to where we are. Not that we're going back to the 1800s, but just a little context for us. And then some possible go forward initiatives that could or couldn't be implemented for us to discuss. Is that sound reasonable? Anything that I'm missing? I tried to bake it down to its simplest form. All right, I get a lot of head nods and what have you. So Mallory, let's you got some exciting presentation stuff.
So we only have 2 hours, which sounds like a lot of time, but I think we're gonna get into some kind of deep conversations about fare structures and service areas. So we're gonna keep today's discussion to just those 2 topics. My team and I will be taking notes so that we can then take your recommendations, craft a plan, and then hopefully over the next 30 or 60 days, we'll have a resolution in front of you to actually adopt a formal fare structure moving forward, as well as formal service area boundaries. So we're gonna tackle fares first. And the first thing to be aware of is that there are regulations, federal regulations, that kind of dictate how fares are established, as well as what those fares can be. So the Federal Transit Administration requires that those agencies receiving 5307 funds, which are urbanized area formula funds, which Battle Creek receives, are required to offer a half fare. So a half fare is for off-peak hours for seniors, people with disabilities, and Medicare card holders. So agencies are able to define senior at the local level. The federal definition of senior is somebody who's 65 years of age or older. And then obviously the Medicare card holder, somebody would be able to present their Medicare card in order to get a reduced fare. Now this applies only to fixed route bus service. So that's the big buses. And if we're talking in Ride Calhoun terms, that would be RC Max. Commuter and express services. And then keeping in mind that any subcontractor, if the TACC were to ever subcontract out additional services, that half fare requirement applies to them as well. So again, I think I've said it multiple times, you cannot contract away your federal regulations, whether it's drug and alcohol testing, fare requirements, ADA requirements, anything we subcontract is still restricted to these regulations. The half fare requirement does not apply to demand responsive services. So only fixed route, commuter, shuttle, express services. It does not apply to demand response. Demand response would be like Marshall Dial-A-Ride. Now, some agencies choose to offer a half fare or a reduced fare. but it is not a federal requirement. It's only required under section 5307. And then it only applies to a single trip fare when that fare is paid in cash or using a fare media that pays the fare of a single trip. So you're not required to offer a half fare, say on a pass, on a multi-ride pass. Now you can offer, right? We have local discretion, but the federal requirement covers a single trip fare.
Really, the slide is a credit card not considered fare media.
There's a lot changing in the landscape of electronic fare payment. So, because there's certifications required, so agencies have a reduced fare, say, application process or reduced fare identifier. So we have a reduced fare card that somebody presents. Without that identifier, somebody would not be eligible for the reduced fare. So let's say we had electronic fare payment. They could tap their credit card. If they're using their credit card, they may not get that reduced fare, but if they're using their reduced fare ID as a loadable form of payment, they would be eligible for that fare.
Unless they have an app
Correct.
that
Yep,
allows for it.
correct. You can put the parameters around your technology, and we'll talk about some of that technology later on. ADA complimentary paratransit. So this would be the RC Move service that we were talking about. Complimentary paratransit is required for any system that operates fixed route bus service. So essentially, complimentary doesn't mean free in this case. It means it complements the fixed route bus system. Somebody would be able to have a similar length and cost trip on an ADA specialized service versus the fixed route bus service. The individuals accompanying an ADA paratransit eligible individual are required to be the same fare as the ADA passenger. Personal care attendants are not charged a fare. They're required to ride for free to provide assistance to the ADA eligible passenger. And then keeping in mind, fares are for customers and passengers, not for organizations. So if an organization wants to contract for service for passengers, ADA or not, their fare can be higher than what the regulation allows. Does that make sense? So I always kind of say the fare is intended to be paid by the passenger. If it's being paid by a third party, then that rate is negotiable. The next is a policy or a resolution that this board will need to adopt in the very near future regarding what thresholds do we determine significant enough to require public comment. So the Federal Transit Administration does not set those thresholds. They set the requirement that you set the thresholds. So we have to have a locally developed process that identifies at what point public comment will be sought for changes to service or fare structure. The example that I use is the city of Battle Creek. We had not increased fares since, it was like 19 years. We just increased fares in 2023, I think it was. And it had been 19 years since we raised our fares. Some of that is likely because it's a very public process. You get a lot of public participation in that process. And, you know, Farebox doesn't, the revenues that we collect at the fair are called Farebox. Farebox doesn't generate a substantial amount of revenue. In our budget for the TACC is estimated between 7 and 10% of our revenues come from Farebox. So an increase in fares doesn't typically net a lot, but it can make the difference between a service reduction or a fare increase. Does that make sense? So this body would need to decide at what point you consider it a major service reduction. The city of Battle Creek, for example, has a resolution that says any reduction in service over 25% of the service hours or miles requires public comment. And then any fare increase requires public comment. So you're not required to hold a public hearing. However, you have to provide an opportunity for somebody to request a public hearing, in which case it's typically easiest to just hold the public hearing and have that opportunity for public comment and public engagement. So one of the next things this body will need to do before adopting a formal fare structure is adopting that local process for how and when fares will be evaluated and service reductions will be evaluated.
Where you leave that again?
Yep.
So does the federal government tell you that if we're gonna have a public notice, is there so many days prior to implementation that you must, either notice or have the hearing? And I'm thinking of October 1st, we're less than 3 months off. So what's our time frame here?
That, they don't set the timeline, but they set the requirement. So your local policy could say you'll provide a 30-day public comment period. That's what our policy says. So if we looked at a 30-day public comment period with a public hearing falling somewhere towards the end of that, we're still in line for October 1st.
Okay. When do you want to do that? Because we're gonna have to get notice out there. We gotta,
Yes.
a lot of stuff.
Yes. Let's go through
Okay.
current fares, and talk about proposed fare structure, and then we can come back to timing. The triennial review process, as well as our annual application process, requires that we certify each year that we have this process in place. And it requires that we notify both the state and FTA if there've been any changes to our service levels or our fare structure. This likely is because of a Title VI analysis. We fall below the threshold of a Title VI analysis being required. However, it could still be best practice for this body to decide that an equity analysis is required before we make a major service reduction or a fare increase over a certain threshold. Now, the Federal Transit Administration doesn't approve that Title VI analysis per se. They just review it at your triennial review. So they confirm that you've done everything your policy says you will do and that the regulation requires you do. So as we move to kind of meld together 4 existing systems, which is, our Battle Creek Transit Service, BC Go, Marshall Dial-A-Ride, and the Albion Marshall Connector, we currently have 4 different fare structures. And there isn't really a lot of, I'm gonna say, cohesiveness between the 4 that makes it an easy, just let's adopt this one and move forward. So I did not, on this list, I did not include the multi-ride passes. So multi-ride passes, I think we can cross that bridge next. Let's focus on the general fare, and then we can kind of take the calculations as an internal team and make a recommendation for internal or for multi-ride pass rates. And then we can talk about a little bit of the technology coming that will help with that. So for Battle Creek Transit, talking about fixed route, big bus again, fares are $1.75 for general fare, 85 cents for that reduced fare or half fare. Transfers are free. Children under 42 inches are free. And then for our demand response service, which is historically teletransit, it's $7 before 7 p.m., $5 after 7 p.m., keeping in mind that we don't currently operate after 7 p.m. right now. And then that ADA paratransit fare is $3. Now, I kind of skipped over this. On the ADA paratransit fare, FTA regulates what the maximum that fare can be is. So no more than twice the fixed route fare. So ADA paratransit fares are largely dictated by the regulation. We don't have to do a lot with that. Once we establish what the general single ride fare for fixed route services, we can then make that the ADA paratransit fare. Correct, yep. In this case, we didn't go the full times two. We increased our previous ADA fare was $2. We increased it by $1. So, you know, a 50% increase, whereas the rest of the system, I think, saw a 40% increase. And that's part of what dictated our decision to go to $3 instead of a full double. Correct. So BC Go, which is our on-demand service, is mileage based. And so trips vary, or fare varies based on the trip length and the distance traveled, ranging from $3 to $15, and each additional passenger is $3. The I guess issue or concern here is that an Albion resident, for example, traveling to Battle Creek is going to consistently have a $15 one-way fare. Keep in mind, all of these fares represent a one-way trip, not a round trip, one-way trip. So somebody going to and from Albion and Battle Creek every day, that would be $30 round trip every day. For Marshall Dial-A-Ride, they have two different fare structures. They have in-town rates and out-of-town rates. So in-town single ride, and keeping in mind this is that demand response Dial-A-Ride style service. FTA doesn't necessarily regulate their fares, but they've established a reduced fare of $1.50, a half fare. The in-town children, ages 5 to 12, are $1.50. Out-of-town rates are slightly higher at $4, with the reduced fare, half fare being $2, and then children following that. Children under 5 with a paid adult or guardian are free, and then Marshall extends the personal care attendant being free for ADA passengers. The Albion Marshall Connector, a single ride is $2, which you'll note is cheaper than an in-town ride for the city of Marshall. A reduced fare on the Albion Marshall Connector is $1, and then same children and personal care attendants are free. Are there any questions on the existing fare structures?
I could just make one comment on the AMC. The reason that fare is lower, it was subsidized by Oakland Hospital, Marshall Schools, Battle Creek Community Foundation, City of Albion. There's 8 or 10 groups that subsidize to help that fare.
And was that like term sensitive, like was it for a certain length of time?
Every year, the group would have to sign on again.
Okay.
So it's an annual renewal for the subsidized components?
Yes, am I right, Matt? I'm looking to you because it's been 3 years now.
That's how I understand it, but it doesn't come through my office at all. I mean, outside of the city of Albion.
A lot of people, I think, have dropped off, and so, I mean,
There were funders for that?
that were funders.
That's my understanding, is that some of that funding has now fallen through.
William, our city finance director, would watch that fund because it's kept separate from the Marshall Dial-A-Ride. And if he needed money, then he'd go out, have a meeting in here with everybody that was part of it.
And I know that we've talked before about Albion's contributions, the city of Albion's contributions to help fund the Albion Marshall Connector. Matt, have you heard any feedback on if that's still happening?
It is.
It is, okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed that children under 42 inches are free for Battle Creek, and for Marshall, children 5 to 12.
Yes. Yes.
Is
I'm wondering
there-
why there's a difference.
Why is there a difference?
It's local decisions. So remember when we started this, we had kind of said the issue at hand is that everybody's operating in their own silos. Because this doesn't even cover some of those private providers or public providers that we pass funds through that are subrecipients, like Community Action Agency and CIR and Marion Birch.
Veterans, I've seen a lot of veteran vans.
Yeah. And so this is only the public transit systems, not Community Action and others that run on donation-based fares or bill insurances. Which, hopefully we get to a more comprehensive system where their fare structure mimics ours, or we have a shareable fare media. But right now, yeah, we've operated in silos for so long that everybody's done their own thing.
The 42 inches is an old transit thing, so that you use the fare box to
Yep.
measure the height of the student at 42, and that's why it became 42 inches.
Yes. I think our old, there was some kind of.
13-year-old can be
Yeah.
short.
Yeah. And a lot of our historical stuff says children shorter than the fare box are free. So it's a good measuring device on the big bus. Yeah.
Mallory
Yeah.
mentioned the Community Action Agency. Senior millage allocation pays $25 per ride with community action. If you're going 3 miles in Albion or cross county, it's $25 that we pay at SMAC to community action, so.
Yes, and that likely is less than their cost for providing that trip.
We just raised it because they were losing some money and that was what they asked they said that would make them whole.
Are there,
Valerie?
yes,
Just to clarify in my mind, if I'm an Albion resident and I want to go to Battle Creek, and as you said, it would be $30 round trip. What would happen if I said, well, I'll take the Albion Marshall connector for $2, and then I'll take Marshall Dial-A-Ride out of town single ride for $4. And, you know, time is not a critical thing for me. I just need to get from Albion to Battle Creek. So what would stop me from doing that round trip for $12?
nothing.
Well, first of all, the out of town in Marshall
Isn't it just a buffer?
Yeah.
is just a buffer zone around.
4th mile.
Okay.
You're gonna have to add a BC Go fare again, so you're looking at least the $7. So by the time you add those all up, you're pretty close to 15.
You have to transfer
Yeah.
from one bus to the other.
Yeah,
Right.
correct.
Mhm.
You would transfer from the Albion Marshall connector to a DART to take you to the edge of the buffer.
To be
And
honest, the AMC operates in the same service area as DART does in Marshall. So you can essentially take the Albion Marshall connector as far as the Marshall DART bus would take you for the same fare. Save yourself some cash out,
So
but
do
you're
you-
not gonna get to Battle Creek Zone.
$2 and it might be, and then to take BC Go the rest of the way, maybe $7.
I just was speculating from the perspective of that creative
Yeah.
potential rider who certainly would, you know.
A game the system.
That's what.
Exactly. It's paid a fare. Nobody would ever try to game the system, right?
That is, you know, when we talk about like regional connectivity, that is kind of the current solution. When we have callers who try to get to Kalamazoo, we tell them, okay, get to Battle Creek, whether it's by train, Indian Trails, Greyhound, whatever it may be, get to Battle Creek, and then you can take our bus system out to the VA hospital and then schedule a ride with Kalamazoo Metro Connect, and they'll pick you up at the VA hospital and take you into Kalamazoo. Time-wise, is that convenient? No, but, you know, we try to make that connection if possible.
Thank you.
So, this is where kind of the robust conversation starts. When we're talking about RC Max, the coming fixed route bus service. What do we do with existing fares versus creating a new fare? What discount programs do we want to offer and what populations do we want to offer those to? Let's talk about some of our current technology on board the vehicle, which is minimal, but what future technology is available and directions that we want to move. What the budgetary impacts are of the decisions that we make regarding fare box and fare box recovery. And then what sponsorship or partnership opportunities are there, to Tom's point about, you know, other agencies contribute to the AMC, for example, to drive the fare costs down for passengers. Yes, sir.
One question that I think, just to set the context for me at least, I know we had said that there were some areas where we did not believe, for example, Max would go, correct? So I believe we said Max would operate in the Battle Creek area only. Is that
Correct,
accurate?
Battle Creek and Springfield.
And Springfield, okay, got it. And then we were gonna have the move in all three or only two?
So Move would cover only the fixed route area as the paratransit service.
Okay, so that
And
was-
then RC Flex would cover the 4 cities altogether.
Okay, so Flex would be everywhere. Max and Move would be in the Battle Creek, Springfield area. Okay,
And 3/4 of a mile outside of
Correct.
those
okay,
areas.
all right.
Yes.
Because I think that's important to discuss, well, for me anyway, it was gonna be important to the discussion because, I think geographically, I think it's gonna make something, it means something different.
Yes, yes. So existing fares, we just talked about the existing fares on fixed route bus. Keeping in mind it's $1.75 for a single ride. It is 85 cents for a half fare or reduced fare. It is free to transfer. So if you have to get off one bus to get onto another, that's free. And then children under 42 inches or under the fare box height are free. We do not currently offer discounts for veterans, low income. We have a student punch pass, but otherwise we don't offer a single ride student fare. And so things for us to discuss today are what are you thinking about moving forward with fare structures for fixed route bus service? Just starting on fixed route. Yes, ma'am.
Well, immediately, I think that raising the fares is out of the question. Especially considering we just raised fares 2 years ago in Battle Creek. And now Battle Creek people feel like they are paying for transportation. To raise the fares would just not go over well. And as a resident of Battle Creek, that's not something that I support either. So yeah, there's that. I think that if we possibly can keep the fares the same, considering what the service areas are for Max, it would make sense to keep them as close to what they are as possible.
And Mallory, I heard you mention veterans and students, but I didn't hear you mention, and people with low income, but I didn't hear you mention seniors. And I know that we have Move, but that's not, I mean, they might not want to ride that, they might want to ride this, so
Mhm.
could we potentially talk about a fare for veterans, seniors, students, like the subgroup having their own?
So the federal regulation is just that we have a half fare, and the minimum requirement is that it applies to seniors, people with disabilities, and Medicare card holders.
Okay.
We can
All right.
add populations to that half fare eligibility at a local level. The Fed set the minimum requirement. We can add any other population we want to that half fare or establish a different fare for them. And then we also can decide locally what that age threshold is. So for example, at the city of Battle Creek, our age threshold is 60 rather than 65.
And then for the passes for students, a lot of my students do use those. And I do think that's a great idea. I'm not actually sure how it works, how they get to the student services building. I know I just go and pick them up. So-
Yeah, somebody comes in and picks up hundreds of them at a time.
And they do
Yeah.
get use, so, I don't think that like increasing the fare for that will be beneficial either, because students are already struggling with getting to school. So if we then charge them a half fare instead of the punch passes that they currently get, they wouldn't be able to do that. A lot of our students do take the bus to get to school.
So the card that they receive is free to them? Okay.
I guess I would agree with Janisha, and I guess I would just question the rest of the board. Does anybody feel differently? That it should go up or down?
I want it to
Does
be
that
as,
include KCC students?
So, no, we didn't use that one. We used to get, we purchase,
Passes, right?
passes of some sort and we give to our students. So we pay, for students who request that need.
so you guys pay for it, but they get it for free.
Yep.
You pass it on to them.
And your students pay for it?
My
No.
schools don't pay for
They
it.
get it for free too. They come and purchase.
Yeah,
them.
the
They
school
purchase
pays
it
for it.
for the students.
Mhm. Same, yeah.
Yes.
So
And
what are-
there's a lot of organizations that do that. So Bronson has passes, the VA hospital has passes, and a lot of it's $1.75, right? For a business, it's not a huge expense to have them at the front desk or wherever to help people get home after an appointment or when they're discharged from the hospital.
Michigan Works and Goodwill Industries, both of them.
Summit
buy
Point,
bulk.
yeah.
They pay $1.75. All of the
Um,
places that buy the passes pay $1.75
or-
for pass? Or-
It
Yeah.
depends. So we do have- When we get to passes, we
Yeah.
have another
Okay.
triptych, which is just an individual ride that we tear off to them, that we do have a special rate for like HSOs.
Human service organizations. So qualified human service organizations can receive the reduced rate when they purchase passes. Because the populations they serve are typically automatically eligible for that half fare or reduced fare, those agencies are eligible to purchase the passes at a reduced fare. Otherwise, you would have to be a registered reduced fare identified passenger to get that, to be able to buy that reduced fare pass.
And for a lot of the agencies, they don't want to hand out a 12 ride or 48 ride pass to one person, because it is a ticket that if it's gone, it's like cash, right? They can sell it at the island, they can do whatever with it. Where they prefer that one single ride use trip that they're handing out to someone, because what if they don't come back and use their services again? And they just paid for 48 trips to maybe not get to the appointments they need, but elsewhere.
So I think I heard you say earlier that the fares in tax budget represent 7 to 10% of the budget. And is that at the existing fare rate?
And I heard too that that was standard industry norm.
Correct.
So we, that would not.
There are not very many agencies that exceed 10% fare box recovery.
Sorry, this is probably a question you might have needed more time for. Where do we, normal curve, where are we on that deduction? Are we like on the top end? Are we in the middle?
We're right in the middle.
We're right in the middle.
Yeah, so last year we were about 8% fare box recovery, and I think a lot of that was probably BC Go, which is the higher fare. But historically, we were about 7%, which is the super large systems that carry high volume, they're a higher percentage, but systems our size are right around 7-8%.
Every system after COVID lost that percentage. Because the riders were less, so the fare box recovery ended up being less. And then so that's why you hear some systems saying they are in financial crisis because they don't have enough money now to match up what service levels they agreed to. But I don't know what Battle Creek's issue was, but you probably lost
Yes,
percentage.
so we, pre-COVID, we were just shy of 500,000 rides a year. Last year, our NTD report was just shy of 300,000 rides. So it's a significant difference. However, we've also significantly reduced service. So both frequency of service, hours of operation. We used to run on Saturdays, so we've lost a whole day of service. So it kind of makes sense there. I believe our ridership will come back if the service came back.
So if you're keeping track, so I'm gonna join two of my compatriots with, I'm okay with leaving the fare as is on Max.
Same, as long as it works for our budget and it works for the people, that seems to make good sense to.
Why change it if it's working?
When we talked about the half fare rate, are we leaving that for just seniors and individuals with disabilities and Medicare card holders, or are you still thinking of the veterans?
You
Like,
guys get to make, this is the fun part now. We get to make all of those decisions.
Well, we age seniors, that sounds bizarre to say, but.
Yeah. Yeah, so what do you want?
Before we
your-
start senior, talking about seniors, what's the age for seniors?
60.
So right now, Battle Creek Transit is 60.
Yeah, is that what we would want to do also, 60?
Yeah. Just because like that's what our senior services identify seniors as, so we don't wanna like.
Marshall is 60.
Well, what he's asking is, do we follow that model or like the AARP model?
Yeah.
It says
Yeah,
50.
no, that's what I'm saying, like,
50.
Or the 55. 'Cause I think-
like, in
I
our city,
think-
that's what
I think 65 is like.
we
yeah,
identify.
I-
right.
too high.
60.
I think for me,
I'm not opposed to
no,
55.
playing on words here, but 60 is the max. 55 is where I think, is the lowest I would go. So I'm just curious to hear, before we talk about the half fare, I would prefer us to set, like, what's the age?
So, already standing today, the majority of our riders are reduced fare eligible riders. I don't think that lowering the age, I would keep, if it were me, I would keep the age at 60 and open up other populations to become eligible, like veterans and low income.
Yes, that sounds great.
Matt,
What impact do you think that is going to have? By using 60 and adding veterans and other.
I do think you're gonna have probably a third of the population that isn't, if not more, that isn't already reduced fare eligible would become reduced fare eligible.
So we're going to, by adding veterans, if that's what we decide to do, and people with low income to the reduced fare eligibility, we're going to reduce the amount that we collect, because you said that about a third more will now become eligible for that half fare. Correct.
But
And are we still gonna be able to sustain our service? I mean, that's what this is all about, right? I
Right.
mean, we're trying to increase service, but at the same time, still make it available to people who need it at a price that they can afford. So that's where the balance has to come in, right? I mean, that's the,
So what if we just added half fares for veterans and not low income? Everybody, I hear a pin drop in here. I said that.
I agree with you. I think we gotta take some baby steps into
Yes.
this. And if we
I'm not saying this is
jump
forever.
in and find out it's crazy, I think
Yeah.
It's harder to take away a service. It's hard to offer and then take it away.
Yeah, that's why I don't wanna
Very
offer
hard.
it to low income, cause I feel that that would be a much larger population than the veteran population.
I will say a majority of, I don't want to say majority, but a large portion of our low income population is already certified as reduced fare. I will say that.
Mhm.
based
Either by
on
age or
age or
disability.
Disability.
So the reduced fare eligibility guidelines are very broad. There are so many conditions and disabilities that qualify for reduced fare on fixed route. That it is a very large population of our ridership already covered under reduced fare. So when, for example, when we were looking at raising our fare back in 2023, our average fare paid at the time was just shy of $1, was the average fare, which meant, and at that time, our fare was $1.25, which meant that we had a significant number of reduced fare riders. I think we were at like 93 cents or something was our average fare. Running back of the napkin math, it would be about a $200,000 difference, 220,000, if we estimated about a third.
so I think I heard you say that a lot of people already qualify for the half fare. And I imagine in that, a lot of people, it would be veterans too. In addition to the people with low income and seniors and those with them. So.
So I guess first question, do we feel comfortable with the senior age staying 60, or do we want to entertain a discussion about lowering that age?
I'm comfortable with
60.
Looks good.
It's consistent.
Yes.
And obviously, people with disabilities would automatically qualify, Medicare card holders would automatically qualify. We,
What was the age for Medicare? I'm sorry.
65.
65.
It is 65, okay,
And I think that's why the regulation says anybody with a Medicare card automatically qualifies.
thank you.
Let's tackle children before we start adding groups, discount groups. Let's tackle children.
Yes.
What do you mean? We talked about the fare box thing.
Well,
The height, the fare box height.
Yeah.
well, that's supposed to go part of my question. With the new buses that are coming out, they're probably not at some point gonna have fare boxes.
So as it stands today, we are, let's talk about current technology on our buses. We have very old Gen Fare Odyssey fare boxes. They basically are fancy cash acceptors and coin. They don't print transfers. They don't give change. They don't allow you to like tap and reload. Nothing. We have paper passes that the driver physically still punches, and we go from there. Moving forward, we continue to submit for applications for grants that would replace that fare box system with a gravity fed, just cash collection box. And then add fare validators, so a small like tap and go kind of thing on the bus. That could change the fare box height that we're talking about.
Yeah, because I don't wanna
I
complicate
think
things.
that's unfair.
With the height?
Maybe we,
The height.
maybe we issue like tape measures.
You could totally put like a mark on the inside of the bus.
The carnival.
Right?
Yeah, now the bus is a carnival ride, yeah.
Just like, yeah.
Yeah, like
Maybe it's
you're going to see.
But
the
how do you know
point.
things stand up?
Yeah, they don't have ID.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Honor system, right? It's,
Honor
Stage?
system.
yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
at what age, no, I'm asking a
I think I
political
was 6 for
question.
3 years.
At what age would you allow your child to ride the bus alone?
They can't, right?
Oh, they can ride fixed route.
Oh, they just can't BC go.
For
Correct.
BC Go, you have to be at least 8 because we follow the guidelines for the
Yeah.
state.
You said 8?
No, 8 to ride with an adult.
Yes.
Years, cause my kids go to skate.
We follow the car seat policy and we know
Yeah.
that extra seats are car seats installed on the van. But 13 to ride independently. So middle schoolers do
Yeah.
ride the service to get to school by themselves. And bus, you would be surprised at the age on bus. I can tell you a couple of years ago, we had a child who stayed on the bus for at least 3 routes.
Cause he didn't.
And the driver was noticing that he wasn't getting off at a stop he was on the Northeast Capitol bus. And she kept calling it in and then she kept asking him, are you sure you're on the right bus? And he said, yep, I just missed my stop. Well, after 3 routes, she called us and come to find out he needed the main and post bus. And he was looking for a park to signal that that's where he got off to go home. And his parents never even knew he was on our bus.
At this age, I would have that same problem.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. But I get it. So it's a matter of the fare box thing is kind of out. The 13, 14-year-old threshold would be,
13.
you get where I'm coming from? An independent threshold that's pretty average,
Versus height.
I would say. And you would get your money from somewhere and away you go.
So let's imagine a mom and her 5-year-old go into Walmart to get groceries.
Or worst case scenario, a mom and
3 5-year-olds or three kids.
100%.
Yeah.
And so now if I got a 15, 14 and 13-year-old, that becomes an issue going to get groceries, include me. You understand what I'm saying?
Or if I have, like my grandson's 9 years old, almost tall as I am, so he would have to pay, whereas his brother wouldn't have to pay. Who is older.
So you could set an age and, the policy or practice is that the driver or the parent just has to tell the age. I mean, again, it's the honor system. It's,
So from an employee perspective, right, if I've never been a driver or a bus. Because you want to make sure our employees are not placed in a
correct.
awkward situation. So from your experience and, from, for example, Matt here, what would you recommend as you as an employee being able to do in a way that maintains a safe and a pleasant working environment? What would be the best thing?
It's a really difficult one because like Mallory said, you kind of have to trust the honor system. And I was thinking that, what children that are, between 10 and 15, a 15-year-old can look like a 10-year-old and vice versa. Without providing some type of identification, there is no way to make it comfortable for the employee. There's just not, unless there's an ID provided to the children. And that's kind of a big requirement to ask of all children, so.
So,
Are we talking about to ride or to pay fare?
To pay fare, like what fare to
What the
charge them.
fare should be.
Not that there's a restriction on age to ride
Correct.
independently.
No.
Okay.
How much we should be charging right now.
I had to make sure that, cause I'm like,
Marshall has that problem right now. I challenge the drivers to, really kind of look at who's riding when they're going to the high school as opposed to the middle school. Middle school, we know they're reduced. But high school, there's just no way to not make it an awkward situation. There's just not.
no high schooler.
My daughter.
Yeah, it's a tough
The
one.
younger one is taller
Like,
than the
like,
older.
you'll get a driver that'll say, yeah, they paid full fare, and then the next time they pay reduced fare, so you kind of, you try to keep everybody on the same page, but it's difficult to do.
So that 13, 14 threshold, I would put on the table for consideration. Because I'm still stuck on that family deal.
Mhm.
Those of us with 5 kids, not riding a bus. You know where I'm coming from?
Can you say that's half fair?
Well, no, but
Students?
my point is, is there a opportunity for a hybrid family fare?
That's what I'm saying, can we talk about if the parent pays for the fare, reduced fare for children that are accompanying an adult?
Yeah, 100%. That's what I'm saying, some kind of hybrid family model. Like you would have in some other places
We
that,
have those I'm just thinking of one of my former students who have 10 kids. And when she walks in, she may have all of them.
yeah, but then that's gonna be the exception.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
on average, if I have 3 kids, that is me and a reduced fare and then 2 other seats that could have been full fare. I'm just putting a business model to it now, right? So I've lost not only half of the fares, but I've also lost the opportunity for full fares in those other seats. And the question would be is, how often does that family model happen?
Mhm.
And 2, does it matter? You get where I'm coming from, because it's more of an equitable situation. And that's just what we're called to do, because that's the situation of, that's a bus thing.
So
We
I,
say our mission is for all.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's typically where transit systems, and I apply with it, is the parent who can't afford to pay, and so they lie and say their kid is 5 when really they're 8. It's not gonna break us, right? The majority of people are honest. I think as long as we make the fare equitable, then, the even 5% of people who might try to sneak one through on us, it's not gonna break the bank. Again, the fare revenue is not what pays the bills.
Right, I would agree, and then family model is really, it's not popular. There's not a lot of families getting on buses, except occasionally on a weekend and occasionally in the summer. And so it's very rare to have a family model ridership. You really have elementary school students, high school students, college students, probably have IDs who are riding as at certain age level. And so you can look at how do you gauge that, but a family model is so rare, and it's not gonna break your bank at all, because
Yeah, but my question is, I've moved away from the financial piece. Is it, I'm back on the associate behind the wheel. Is it a nice to have? Because it takes that pressure off of, if I'm coming on with 3 kids, you get where I'm coming from?
I do,
And-
and I think if leadership, you know, conveys the same message, you know, from Mallory down. If, you know, if that's what I'm, you know, it's explained to me, then, you know.
Yeah,
that's-
I get what you're saying. So I'm giving you a little bit of autonomy here. Forget Mallory's. Okay, I'm talking about, you made a comment on what your rider's reaction would be, and it'd be uncomfortable. Does that situation, having that in your toolkit, make it more comfortable for your staff? Or does it not matter? I'm just asking an inquisitive question here.
Not enough to really matter. No, I
Okay.
wouldn't say it would be enough to make a big difference. It's a very, very minute portion of the.
Okay, so my other question is, Mallory, I'm inserting you back into this. Would the public see it as a nice to have? I mean, am I getting something for, you understand what I'm saying?
I do. You know, that isn't something that we've heard in the past. I think really what the public has been looking for are more technology options. So like the ability to buy a full day pass. And that may be the better way to go. It's cheaper for them to pay for a full day of unlimited rides than it is to pay for, you know, 8 one-way trips.
I think the thing that you have to gauge is when is your technology gonna switch so much on fair payment systems that now you have flexibility to do things? Because once you have a fair payment system, you have other options. So you could do fair capping, so nobody pays more in a month for any rides that they ride. But you have to have that system in place. And so if you have GFI Gen Fare boxes, more than 50% of the buses don't have the flexibility yet to be on it, but the transition will occur because when you buy new buses, you get rid of the old technology and you have the ability to tap and go. And in some systems, they now have, you use your Visa card, period. You tap your Visa card on, off, and you paid a normal fare. And so even any kid with a debit card can pay the normal fare, and depending upon what, so that's what you have to work with staff here is when is your transition gonna occur? So you have a different kind of fare payment system that you can be more flexible about these issues.
I didn't mean to derail that.
Yeah.
We can come back to that, to Peter's point.
Yeah.
Let's just handle the basics right now, so we have kind of a direction. And then think of the other affinity groups that we might include. Amy,
So the cards that the students get to ride that they don't pay for, that are free, is that just to and from school, or is that anytime they can ride the bus anytime with those cards?
So I tell my kids that they're just to and from school, but I have no way of knowing if they're using them at other times.
And we used to restrict, it was only, you know, they could only use that pass if they were being picked up or dropped off to school. We don't really police it anymore.
So it's just something they show, and it's not like something that you,
It's a
Fun for-
punch pass,
okay, so
So
there
it-
could be only so many,
so many rides.
Yeah.
correct.
somebody's, okay.
So
So if I
let's,
have a kid who I gave them a 12 punch pass and they come back to me in 2 days and say they need another pass, like clearly you didn't use that to just go to and from school. So that would be a conversation.
how you know what their situation is, when you down around?
She said, because I know that we've only been in school for 3 days, so that's 6 rides.
They work, they hustle.
So then, do they have to wait in that situation, wait another?
No.
3
I'll
days?
just have a conversation with them. I actually have not come across that situation. Most of my kids are pretty honest and they really do need it to get to and from school, so they're just using it for
They're not
that.
trying to use it to go to the mall, to
No,
the movies?
especially not to our mom.
Well, I'm just saying somewhere else.
yeah.
Clark's not riding that bus. So no, that's good. We wanna continue?
Yeah, so if we're talking children age, not fair.
Yes.
If we're talking children age, we'd prefer an age model over a height model.
Would you say student?
No.
No.
Well,
No, the children.
I have student next, so
Like you think of all the kids that are homeschooled, they would never have a student ID.
100%.
And we have
I mean, I
classes
guess I
in
mean
90s and
student
3s,
age.
essentially.
Oh, you got.
Really?
you're back to
Age?
age.
Student IDs
You're
in
back
3
to
years.
age.
Well, they don't have IDs anymore?
Some people are, I
They
have
have
people
a
at 4,
Mm-mm.
my son was
Mm.
6,
He doesn't
depends
even know either.
on what your birthday is.
So you just,
So-
so
Yeah, we gotta know the kids.
13 or 14
wow.
Yeah.
is where we're at.
So remember, look at like Marshall's
Yeah.
structure. They have it, if you're under 5 with a paid adult, you're free. If you're 5 to 12, you're at the reduced fare rate. Anybody over 12 pays adult fare, single fare
And that's
So
per
13 and
trip.
over.
per trip. Again, this is on the fixed route. We're only
Yeah.
talking about fixed route right now. So the Marshall's is the dial-a-ride system, but just as an example of how they've broken theirs down by age rather than,
This is funny. Hey, Tom, how do you determine who an out-of-town child is?
Well, out of the city limits.
Oh, okay, that's out of town?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which.
I'm holding you responsible for everything about it.
Every time. About
Small
1
town,
hour left.
everybody knows everybody.
Like, let's see this.
Looking at that model,
Yeah.
under 5 would be free, 5 to 12 would be 85 cents.
Okay.
If we're talking just fixed route.
And
I think we should just do
13
that.
and older is
Over.
full.
I mean, if we're talking about age, you know, it's
They
not
can
higher.
create the wheel, go.
It works.
We don't.
So-
Eric's got a question or something.
Yeah, he's on pins and needles.
Let me hear from Eric.
You got a question?
I just had a suggestion.
Oh,
on the
okay.
RC Max fare instead of,
Well, hold on just a second. So, I'm gonna run an audible here. We did have Eric in the assistant county administrator.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Hey, I have to get this straight. I'll run audible on the agenda and maybe allow public comment.
Yeah.
On occasion
Yeah.
and kind of go from there. Everybody.
Yeah,
good with
you
that?
don't have to at a work session, but
Yeah, no, but.
Eric's I think Eric's part of us, so. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
wanna-
but I mean, Eric's here now, but if
Yeah.
3 more people walked in, I'm saying that I would allow it if it became a thing. Are we all comfortable with that? Board members that voted for the agenda?
Yes.
Friendly amendment.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm saying that. Okay, Eric, I had to do that perfunctory
Thank
thing, cause you know,
hey, no worries.
all right.
So on the fare structure for the RC Max, currently we have the $1.75, which would be our transit services with the buses. That'd be $1.75 to get from, say, Family Fare on Northeast Capitol to Walmart out on Southwest Capitol. You'd have to have a transfer downtown. So instead of doing that, how's about having $1 to get on the bus at Family Fare? And then downtown, you have to pay another $1 to get on that bus to go out to Southwest Capitol. That would eliminate our need for transfer tickets. And it would allow for someone who only needs to get from Family Fare on Northeast to downtown for $1 and back for $2, instead of paying $3.50, unless it's outside the transfer window. And then
What's the transfer window?
transfer window is 2 hours. You get a transfer ticket and it's good for 2 hours from when it was issued. And you only have a certain radius around the transit transfer center that you can use it.
And you only can get that at the downtown
Transfer center.
transfer center by the
There's
post
a
office?
couple other spots throughout the routes that are available. I believe it's Columbia and Southwest Capitol, and then Emmett and Kendall, I think. At the library area.
If your ordinance destination requires you to have 2 buses, right now you don't pay fare twice. You get a transfer slip, and that's what he's talking about. So if you live out on Northeast Capitol, but you need to get to Southwest, we don't make you charge both. We hand you that slip, so the second bus is included in your fare.
Yeah.
Where that route, if you were an individual who your origin and destination is on one route, you'd save money.
Yeah.
But if you're going on that longer distance trip, it would be more expensive
And I think,
by 25.
25 or 50.
It would be $4.
Well, $1.75 compared to 2, so 25 cents.
I think we need to talk, like, I'm looking here time wise, so we got a lot to cover, but I think, I wanted Eric to at least
Thank
to
you.
give us ideas, and so.
Well, will that? I mean, when we talk about service areas, I think we're gonna maybe also consider just what the current routes are
Mhm.
and would would it change where you wouldn't have to change buses to get
So-
from one to the other, or is that always gonna still be a thing? You're
So
gonna have to-
transfers are likely always gonna be a thing. We have money set aside to do a route study and help us optimize and realign our existing fixed route system. With the idea being to realign each route so that there's housing, banking, employment, and food access on each route. Right now, a lot of our routes are very residential so we either have like commercial routes or residential routes. They don't really kind of mix. So if you're coming from like a residential route, exactly, you have to go downtown, transfer, and then get on your main bus, I guess. Your route optimization may extend. Right now, for example, we have routes that are 30 minutes long. That may make it an hour long, but you wouldn't have to transfer to access the things that you would have transferred for previously.
But with a transfer, that might, I mean, you have to take one bus, wait for the next bus. I mean, that could still be an hour, but
Correct.
you have to change buses, and
Correct.
this way you don't in that situation.
Correct.
But I'm just
Unless you
thinking, is
wanted
that
to go
gonna
somewhere else.
affect the price too? Is that something we need to consider when we're, like, for that example, you know, if there's no transfer, then that would affect, then we'd be getting only $1 instead of $1.75 in that situation.
Or if transfers were less frequent, or right now, the way our system is designed, it kind of forces you to transfer. Almost everybody transfers downtown.
That seems less than ideal, at least to me.
Yes.
I mean, I used to ride the bus in Chicago from my apartment to 5.5 miles to work downtown, and I never had to transfer. It was an hour drive to only go 5.5 miles, but I stayed on the whole, the same bus the whole time. I took the train sometimes and I took the bus sometimes, and if I had to transfer on the bus, I would have always taken the train. I wouldn't have taken a bus if I would have had to transfer to get to work in the
And then
morning.
something there is also that you likely had transfer points at bus stops rather than at one central downtown location, right? So we kind of have this like hub and spoke thing going, where it requires you to go downtown to transfer to a different bus, rather than aligning the routes in a way that allows them to intersect throughout the trip, creating additional transfer points.
Where you still have to get off the bus, wait at the bus stop until the next bus comes, and then get on that one, and, depending on how long it takes, the next bus might be there in a minute, but it might be 15 minutes, right? I mean,
Your route study is gonna show a lot of
Yeah.
interesting things.
And that may be a good opportunity to have them do a fare box recovery analysis on what the implication of say eliminating free transfers. If we're designing the fixed route system to make it, less transfers or less buses to complete a trip, then maybe we look at eliminating the free transfer and start either charging for a transfer or adjusting the fare in the future once we have the results of that fare or that route study.
So should we
You
just
should
keep
do
it as it is?
Analysis to make those decisions. I think what's in front of you right now is, are you getting rid of the height, or are you going to?
We got rid of the high side, the 1800s. The
5 to 12.
the 5 to 12
Will be reduced fare.
will be reduced fare. And that kind of says the same thing. I like that clarity.
14 plus is.
Are we all good with that?
Yes.
Okay, look, we made 2 decisions today.
Great, so we have the senior age, so we have single ride is $1.75, reduced fare is 85 cents. The senior age is gonna be maintained at 60. Children under 5, free. 5 to 12 would be reduced fare, so the 80 cents. 13 plus would be full fare. Next one is students. What other discount groups do you want to include? Student fares, veteran fares, low income fares. I think I heard Amy previously say maybe not the low, was it you?
No, I said that.
Oh, Asia?
Yes. Just because we were talking about, at that point when we brought that up, we were talking about possibly bringing down the age of seniors to 55.
Mhm.
And then doing half fares for veterans and low income. And I'm just trying to think about the budget and the fact that a lot of people who are already half fares are veterans. A lot of them are low income as well, probably. But I don't know, I'm not basing this off facts. This is an assumption that I feel like there will probably be less people that fall under the veterans category than there are that fall under the low income category, which could let us introduce a discount that has not been introduced yet, but still keep us within the budget that we would like to have. And when I was saying, that's not forever, if things change, we could introduce low income half fares or discounts or whatever the case may be, but I don't wanna, like Paul said, introduce low income fares and then it's not working and we have to take it away. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, that study's gonna show us a lot, I think.
And to piggyback off of what she said earlier, students aren't getting student IDs anymore, so that's one more thing where the drivers are trying to figure out where they're going, what's their age. Like if we already have like a children policy for different fares, why can't we just continue to create a student pass that's sold to the schools or other agencies and then they ride at that pass rate? And then we don't look at the age.
Yep.
Or where they're going. Sorry, we
Yes.
can't control that either.
Right.
If they're going to,
That-
what if they're going to Lakeview today and Math and Science Center
Yeah,
tomorrow?
I know y'all
We don't
are allowed
know.
to
They
do
changed
that.
direction.
Do you mean not punch the card? Or do-
No, we still use a punch
You
pass. We
still
just
punch
sell it at a student rate.
If you get a student card, I don't care where you go.
Mm-hmm.
You get where I'm coming from, because, yeah, I could be going to the mall, I could be going to the beach, or I could be going to a job interview
Right.
that has nothing to do with the school.
Mhm.
So it gives you freedom and autonomy in this town.
Mhm.
Who am I to try and restrict?
Mhm.
Take your card and do what you're gonna do. Now,
See, I'm
don't.
still tell them, go to school, cause we don't
Right?
get that many, so.
Yes.
No, I get what you're saying, but I'm just looking at it.
No,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have no way of knowing
Yeah.
what
Right.
they're actually.
If you take that card as a student, you're not thinking about, this is my primary mode of transportation. You know you really need it because my mama gotta go to work.
Yeah.
And so that's probably 90% of the population. You only have 5% of the population. That's like, oh, me and my boys can go wherever
Yep.
we need to go. But I'm saying both those
Just
scenarios.
graduated from KC.
To that point, I'll share, we have a partnership kind of pilot going with Bronson right now where they've purchased employee passes. And at first, the conversations were very much like, okay, this is for employees to get to and from work. But then it kind of evolved to like that human perspective again, right? That, why do we care if they're going to the laundromat to wash their uniform or go get groceries or take their kid to daycare? What do we care what they're using it for? It's an employee benefit.
There you go.
So, looking at the student pass kind of the same way, that was where we landed with I don't care if the kid is going for a social activity or if they're going to school, giving them access and autonomy and independence, I think is the bigger picture.
So we want to
Agreed.
put VA in the reduced fares. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
so veterans, what I have is that veterans would fall under the reduced fare. So the fixed route half fare would cover veterans, seniors, people with disabilities, and Medicare card holders. Sound fair?
So, in
Yes.
terms of students,
Mhm.
how do you qualify? Because, KCC is a commuter college and we may have a 25-year-old or 35-year-old who is a student. So would that fall under the student
So what we
rate?
do is I don't know if we bought passes recently, but
Not that
it's on I just sent myself an email to like remind them to like make sure like to see what that number is at. So we would call BCT, we get a stack. So we pay the amount. And then if a student, so then we publicize it on our
For a
campus
semester,
for a semester.
okay.
And if that student comes forward and says, hey, I would need a bus card, we just give it to them.
You don't ask the age or anything, you just give it to them because they're your student.
They're our student.
Yeah.
They're registered.
Okay.
So age, so for us, the limiting factor is not age.
Right,
It is, are you a student here for this semester?
Even if they're a part-time student?
yeah. So your student is different from his student.
They're the same, both organizations, both schools purchase passes from Battle Creek Transit.
The same
And
way.
then we distribute them out at our own discretion within our own schools.
Right, and you do the
It's
same.
all the same card?
Yes,
It's the
yeah.
same
Their
card.
purple punch pass says student card right on it, and they literally just board the bus, hand it to the driver, we punch it and hand it right back. Like
Okay.
it's simple.
Yeah, I just wanted
The
the
peers covered.
KCC
Yep,
students
they-
to be covered as well,
Yep.
yeah.
And so then when we talk about sponsorship or partnership opportunities, that's where we can talk about, so I'm gonna say KCC because you're in the room. KCC could say, we want all students to ride free. We don't want to have to buy these passes anymore, right? There's opportunities for the TAC and organizations to enter into contracts that just pay a flat fee or pay a fixed price per student or for the school year. And everybody gets to ride, all the students get to ride for free, right?
So WK Kellogg Foundation, isn't their target population children? Seems like they would be a good one to talk to for paying for all students. No? They have a big budget. They have a big budget.
you in there. We gonna send you in there. Don't say nothing about the TAC. Just go on in there.
Money
It
to do
used to be.
around there, and they send it off the world.
So well, here's my thing. So traditionally, they focus on city, Grand Rapids, Battle Creek, and Detroit.
And other parts of the world.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, yeah, just the cities,
Here in-
in cities.
Okay. I just thought they focused on children. I mean, not just, I mean, children
No,
among other things,
no,
but that's their
I
target
understand.
population.
I understand, but yeah, so, but they have, part of their mission is to focus on things within those cities. So for us, for example, how we are an organization that straddles more than one city. If we were to ever go to them, they might come back and say, well, what about, so we could get subsidized for a portion of the fares, but I don't know if we'd be able to be successful in getting
Yeah.
it.
Let's build the system first.
Yeah.
And then we can come, we can come
Okay,
back.
big
and-
budget,
okay.
and that's
Well,
their
but that is, I would include Benda, KCC Foundation, all of these.
GPS.
Yeah, all of these
No.
players that could play a role in some capacity. In meeting that need, but we need to bake out
Yeah.
the full system so we get the ask right. That's, our reaction was based on, they get asked a lot. Based on that same concept, because that's what they lead with. But at the end of the day, that broader impact has to be evident. We'll be able to prove that.
So Mallory,
Yes.
having heard the board here, what is your sense of board consensus on several different things that you can just name?
Yeah, so I think Christy and I just, did the silent talk across the room. I think we all understand the board's direction on fixed route. $1.75, kind of maintaining our existing fixed route fare structure that the community is already familiar with, but expanding that reduced fare to veterans and changing the way we identify children. Also extending the reduced fare to children between the ages of 5 and 12.
That would be an affirmative.
Yes. So we will put together, that kind of maintains the existing pass rates. To Peter's earlier point about technology, understanding where we're going for future technology. Right now, everything is very archaic, manual, paper driven. We need to transition to something more electronic and something that allows us to collect data. So right now, if I want to know how many people are getting on and off at a particular bus stop, I sit a driver or somebody in a seat on the bus with an Excel spreadsheet
No.
that they tally by hand. Yep. Yeah.
Come on, man.
We don't have any sort of onboard technology that gives us this data or that validates this data. So as we move forward, ordering new buses, we're ordering new technology, but it's gonna take a minute for us to get the fleet fully implemented. So what we've always tried to avoid is so we just ordered 7 new buses, right? Big fixed route buses. I don't wanna have 7 of my 13 with this new fare payment, electronic fare payment, but the other, 6 don't. And so today you got on that old bus that can't take your debit card and you have no way to pay your fare. The fare boxes are expensive. All in, including the media, is about $40,000 per fare box.
But
per
what about,
bus.
like, isn't there some kind of, device that's portable that you could use? I mean, people use their, I'm not saying this is what you wanna do, but merchants have their phones with a little thing in it that you can swipe a card. Like, is there something portable that you could do in
That's-
those other 6 buses?
That's what we're looking at as kind of the stopgap. Rather than getting those big $40,000 machines, we're not a huge system, you know, we already count the cash every day. We can continue doing that, and the people who are gonna pay with cash, it just goes into a box, right? That the driver visually validates and plunges it into the safe. Those who wanna pay with a reloadable fare media or a open loop payment, like Peter had said, the credit or debit card, they can just tap it on the validator that's mounted to the stanchion on the, when you get on the bus. They tap it on the validator, it then feeds the driver the information, so the driver can indicate, okay, this is a student, this is a whatever it may be, right? To populate what the fare payment is. So there is some level of driver interaction. But for loading times, we don't want the driver to have to sit there and enter transactions and swipe cards. Ideally, we get to the point where there's technology in place that allows the passengers to pay for their trips in advance. So, you know, they're on their app, they're doing their trip planning. Okay, I need to get on bus 5 at 9:15 a.m. I buy my pass here, driver visually validates it, they get on. That simple. Right now, we don't have anything like that. And to Peter's point earlier, that gives us more flexibility to add additional options. So the direction that we're going is fare capping. The fare capping allows us to cap somebody's fare at what a monthly rate would be. Let's say a monthly pass is $60. We could say, okay, once you hit $60, you're not gonna get charged anymore, rather than requiring somebody to come up with that $60 up front to buy the pass. Does that make sense?
It's, you're gonna get there eventually. I mean, we were the second system in Michigan to go to fare cap, second system in the US to go to fare capping in Grand Rapids. And now it's more common because you have that available technology that's built in. The question is, at what point are you gonna be able to transition so that you just have fare validators and a dump box for the cash? It's because you're always gonna, unfortunately, you're living in a society where there's always gonna be people who only have cash. And then you're also gonna have people who are evolving more as the younger generation comes in. Their cash is in their phone.
I don't know where my debit card is.
And it's very different from any time, but I think Mallory's gonna have to guide you to the point where you say, now is a good time to start transitioning, getting a grant to get that system in. Because that's how it's done, you know, and eventually the fare box disappears. Actually, in some ways, it just disappears.
Yes.
So it seems like we should just keep the fares as they are until we have the study and the technology and then change them.
Yes.
Because then we'll have a better understanding of what they should be.
At least on the max.
Yeah,
Their
so
pricing or
On
like, what do
the,
you-
on the max,
Yeah.
yeah, on the fixed route service.
like, so are we saying that after we do the study, we'll think about changing the current fare structure? Or just the way that we're collecting fares?
I was saying both.
collecting and maybe additional like passes or perks, like she said, with the fare capping. The, like,
Yeah.
the way the passes are sold for
I'm just trying to make
students,
sure we're
things
going
like
like
that.
in the direction of not raising because,
Charging.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
A benefit
I'm
to
good.
them.
I just wanna make sure that we're
technology.
on the same page about that.
So paratransit services, this is gonna be the RC move. Keep in mind, paratransit is only for ADA certified individuals. ADA certification or eligibility has nothing to do with, somebody's appearance or not appearance of having a disability. It has everything to do with their ability to use the fixed route system. So whether or not the person can travel independently using fixed route is what determines ADA eligibility. Christy is our mobility manager. She is working on or has already drafted an ADA policy as well as ADA eligibility criteria. So somebody would apply for ADA status. Christy would evaluate that application. She would do an in-person assessment of their ability to use the system and then determine if they meet the federal regulation for ADA eligible. The ADA eligibility could vary based on weather. It could be conditional based on the person's condition. It could vary based on where they're traveling. So I'm gonna pick on the bus stop at the corner of Riverside and Columbia. There is a bus shelter that is up on the curb in the grass. There is no curb cut, there is no sidewalk, there is no way for an individual in a wheelchair to get to the bus stop, other than to sit on the road in the bike lane. That would be a perfect example of an ADA eligible trip, because that path is not accessible for them to complete that trip. We're required to provide that paratransit service 3/4 of a mile in any direction along the fixed route. So you have your fixed routes, just picture the buffer like the city of Marshall has, but only around the fixed route service. Today, we operate teletransit as a commingled service of paratransit and demand response. Our goal is to kind of separate the two for compliance and reporting purposes. So right now, we struggle when FTA comes to be able to show the comparable and equivalent service. We're required to provide equivalent service. If we don't have distinction between our routes, it makes it a little bit muddier. Now, if there's available space, we can put general passengers on there. But for now, consider RC Move only the paratransit service. This would mean that rate for paratransit could go up to $350 if this board chooses, because it can be twice the fixed route fare.
Right now it's $3.
Right now it is $3. Really, that is the only thing we have to determine for the paratransit side, because the regulations cover everything else.
Say $3.
Maintain it at $3.
That's my opinion. I don't.
Is that working? Do you have people who can't afford the $3, and what happens then?
So,
Well, isn't that the same as the Marshall dial ride? I mean,
That's full.
as far as the bus size,
It is, but that's full
And you're-
fare. What?
but yours is 3
3 for full fare.
for the same size vehicle, and that's 3, so that's consistent. I don't know.
It is and it isn't, Amy, because Marshall has extended reduced fare to seniors and those with disabilities. That's a, like Battle Creek, that's a majority of who we transport. And so a lot of folks in Marshall are used to paying $1.50.
Remember,
this
this
won't be in
service is
Marshall, right?
only Battle Creek and
Yeah,
Springfield.
so it won't
Right,
really
This does
impact.
not affect Marshall.
Right, I guess I'm just
Who's
thinking,
Right.
trying to be consistent.
Right, but we're getting to that next, so I guess as a whole,
Yes.
as a community, I'm just kind of looking forward to what you guys are gonna discuss next.
Eventually, we should.
so what I hear is maintain paratransit at its current fare structure.
Yeah.
The $3.
Yes.
And you haven't found problems with that because they can get partial coverage from other sources, maybe.
And, sometimes those paratransit trips are paid for by a third party, like a Summit Point or Grace Health, stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, so now the one that's gonna be far more difficult is gonna be the on-demand demand response. This is where we have the 3 different fare structures. So you have the Albion Marshall connector that exists currently, that would be considered demand response. You have BC Go, that would be considered demand response. And you have the Marshall dial ride system that's considered demand response. Those would all go away and become RC Flex.
Were they budgeted in the TAC budget?
They were budgeted at a 7% fare recovery.
So it wasn't based on what they are now, because there's 3 different things now.
So can I tell something else?
Yeah.
So the 2 structures right now are predominantly either a fare or mileage based. So in order to be consistent, so here's my toss out. My gut says go with a mileage based across all 3.
I will tell you from a technology standpoint, just so we're aware, if you incorporate a mileage-based system into your technology platform, they cannot incorporate a flat fare down the line. We just tried this between us and Marshall. Just so we know it. Most providers can't commingle that we've found.
So if we choose a mileage, we'd have to stay with mileage.
And the disadvantage of mileage is Albion, Battle Creek.
Cause we're trying to get to at some point, I mean, yes, now we just have the 4 cities, but the goal is the whole county, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know if we should be considering that now or not, but I mean, right now we have the 4 cities, but that's not the end goal.
And there's still a way to incorporate looking at where people are traveling. Like we talked about this recently and I was talking to our technology provider. You can still switch to a flat rate system, but still think of it as a mileage based system. So if you say Battle Creek is zone A, and that's how we're looking at the fare structure. What is it to travel within zone A to zone A? What is it to travel from zone A to zone B, which is Marshall? What is it to travel from zone A to zone C, which could be Albion? Like you can still set flat rates to travel in those zones, but if you're traveling within the zone of zone C, you get one flat rate, or if you're traveling all the way across, you get a different. So that option is still there as well.
So we could use in that situation, if you go back to the, PC Go where it's, the different mileage, there's what, 4, 5 different ones? We could do, instead of miles, zone A, B, and C.
So you
maybe-
can create like a graph.
No, we could do a
People
package.
traveling.
Packages. FedEx is, yeah.
And my idea with that, I wanna say is looking at the Albion service. So right now, we are still struggling to fill that vehicle. And I know we've talked about fares being an issue. If we start to really look at the demographics of our community and what can our communities afford, and you go away from mileage base, which means it's everyone, right? And you start focusing on community. Zone C to zone C could have its own flat fare that maybe looks different than zone A to zone A. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
and you can start to look at the actual community that we're serving.
Because I think, we're almost, I think, have to have my flat rates. Because the mileage isn't going to work. It's not going to be
A lot of the
advantageous.
community feedback we've gotten so far, obviously a lot of people have been asking about fares, right? I don't think there's been a meeting we've been in where people haven't asked, what is this gonna cost? And there is a feeling that people have already paid for it, right? Am I gonna have to pay for it again just to use it? I've already paid for it in my taxes. So just keeping that in mind when you're thinking about the top end of the fare structure. I brought that back up, but that zone-based fares I put on there to consider because it's easy to implement. The consultants, when they did the transit study back in 2020, they proposed a zone-based fare model that would, like Christy said, kind of give you. They also proposed it as a scheduling way. So Jackson County, for example, does it this way, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we serve this parts of the county. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we serve this part, and you have to schedule your trips on those days, stuff like that. Later on in the line, if operations dictate, we could adjust. But I think for now, let's focus on fares. And if we like the idea or don't like the idea of a mileage-based system, then do we like the idea of a zone-based system? Or is it just a flat fare? Now, geographically, we're a very large county by area. So that, let's say we chose a flat fare of $3 to go from Albion to Battle Creek, that's probably a $60+ trip cost operationally.
At that point.
You're not at 7% fare box recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess knowing the size of our cities, I'm gonna use Albion and Marshall for now and not connecting. If it's under 6 miles to get across town. So
Within your own town.
within each town.
Mhm.
And charge the same rate as we currently are, the $3, the $1.50, that. I don't want to talk about the out of town at this time. And have the same child ages and stuff like that when we are within each
Your zone.
community. you stay within the jurisdiction, it's $3. And then we come up with a rate of what is the rate to fill in, you know, if you look at, you know, the map, that's coming up here, you know, to fill in the gap from Albion to Marshall, we need to figure a rate for that. We need to figure a rate to then get to the rest, but inside those two cities, keep the fare that's being charged. And then we need to talk about the flex within the city of Battle Creek, because you're over 6 miles to get across, because you're almost a full township. That would be my thought.
I thought somebody said it was 10 minutes from Albion to Marshall. Is that-
Miles.
It's 10 miles, because when you're looking at that map, and it looks further than, I mean, because to me, it seems like it takes me a half an hour to get here. And that's gotta be more than 10 miles, but these look closer than these do on that map.
Yeah, exit 112 and your exit
Mhm.
121. So anyways, that's my initial thought, just like we did with the Battle Creek side, is to keep the same rate there. And then we can talk about how do we connect, but we need to talk.
Zone to zone, you mean? So like
Yeah.
so within Albion, maintain the $3. Within Battle Creek, maintain the $3.
Well, I don't know if you can, that's gonna be,
I think you
that's,
said within Marshall, maintain the
Okay.
well,
$3.
yeah, that's a question I can't answer for you. I mean, for Battle Creek,
Because it's
because,
bigger.
you know, to get across town Battle Creek is quite a few miles.
I will say most of the BC Go trips we provide in Battle Creek are $3. Our $5 trips are usually Battle Creek to the casino, like you're heading into those townships. When we hit that, but a lot of the ridership that we have for dialysis and different things like that on BC Go, they're $3.
Yeah, because you're going to the core of the city,
Mm-hmm.
then I would recommend that we do $3 one-way rides for the flex.
I like that, but is it feasible?
And they
Like for Battle Creek?
think of it as zones, you know, that, I
So
like
we
the
don't
zone
need
idea. I hadn't
to
heard of
stay
that.
within
Yeah,
Battle
and that's what I was
Creek.
just
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah,
I know that 5 is probably like the max
Mhm.
number for round trip towns, but I'm just wondering, like, does that $2?
make a difference, yeah.
Guess
Can
whoever,
you time your zone? It's $5 when fixed route is available and you're traveling with.
I was just gonna say, so realistically,
$3 when
you
it's not.
want to shift modes. You want to shift behavior to the more efficient mode. So if, during the hours when fixed route is operating, it's a higher fare to use the flex service in the city of Battle Creek, because again, you want to push people to the fixed route service. And then after the fixed route service is off the road, you can make it a more affordable fare.
I like that.
That's the best technical
You can
assistance.
still do all of it.
Wait.
Because fixed route can't get you there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It works.
Yeah.
okay,
That
Okay.
sounds good.
So,
Yeah.
and that would
And
mimic
it's
the
cheaper for
teletransit.
children to be on fixed route.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and they're not gonna pay $5 a ride to ride BC Go.
Yeah.
Typically.
Oh, that's really good.
That's
I
awesome.
think that's a positive
Or
statement to say about Calhoun. This is the rate in Calhoun
Mhm.
for your authority, so as other systems start coming in, this is how gets folded in, and so you're establishing a sense of right Calhoun versus different services. It sounds good to me.
Yes.
How do we look at Springfield with that, Mallory, since we're kind of wrapped around them?
I would, as long as the fixed route service is as available in Springfield as it is in Battle Creek, I would say right now, I would put Springfield in the $3 range.
I agree.
Once we have that study complete and the routes designed to serve Springfield more robustly, then we would adjust the fare to reflect the same as the city of Battle Creek. That would be my recommendation.
We're 3.7 square miles is the size of Springfield, so, are you saying that $3 is to stay within Springfield or to go from Springfield to Battle Creek, which, is across the
Springfield
street?
to Battle Creek.
Yeah,
I think Springfield is the only exception
yes.
from that $3 fare not remaining in town, because honestly, where are you gonna go in Springfield?
Yeah, you need to access Battle Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to go to Southeast Capitol, the doctor's office or whatever, it would be the $3.
So what I'm hearing is that within each community, that zone for each community is $3, with the exception of the city of Battle Creek, would be $5
While the buses are.
during fixed route hours. After fixed route hours, it would go down to $3. My team and I will work on doing some calculations on those zone to zones. So just to give an idea of actual cost per vehicle mile or cost per vehicle hour on traveling from, say, Albion to Battle Creek, what it would take for us to, if we're looking at maintaining that 7% fare box recovery rate, what would it take? What would that fare have to be? That is kind of how we came up with the BC Go fare structure as it is today.
So when you're saying zone to zone, okay, from Albion to Battle Creek, I understand, and I guess that can be any place in Battle Creek. But if you're saying Albion to the casino, is
They're not
that,
in our service
The
area.
casino is outside of our service area.
we are not entertaining that at all yet.
Not yet.
Yet.
Next
We'll have
topic.
some conversations.
Next, okay.
Which,
Within each city, in Springfield and Battle Creek being considered one, it's $3. And you're gonna look at the mileage cost. What do we add on to that $3 to get
zone to zone.
from Albion, from zone to zone?
Yes. And so we'll do like a ABC, right? Zone A to B, A to C, C to B, that
Mhm.
we'll do the math. And get some estimates on what the fare would have to be and see where you guys feel on that. The question I have for you is discount and discount groups on demand response and on-demand services. Yes, ma'am.
So I think that, I don't know what it would take, but it would be interesting to see what it would look like for like employees to have some type of discount that are traveling from zone to zone. Because like earlier when I was looking at the $15 per ride, if somebody was taking that to work, like from Albion to Battle Creek, and that would cost them like $600 a month just in getting to and from work. And so I'm just like wondering if there's any way that we can like offset that.
Mhm.
I don't know what it would look like, but.
So right now, a good example would be that we have wallet funds. So somebody could purchase $50 in wallet funds, but they get $60 of trip credits. Similar to like a discount that you would get for a multi-ride pass. We currently do not offer any other discounts on BC Go other than those wallet funds. And it hasn't been an issue. We don't offer senior fares, disabled fares. Yes.
Just like how you offer for the fixed route, the tickets that we use for our students. Is there anything that an employer can purchase from BCT to go towards a service like this or not?
We have agreements, so I'm gonna use the Bronson agreement as an example. But typically, when we're making those third-party contracts, we're contracting at a different rate. So again, keeping in mind that the $1.75 or the $3 is intended for the passenger to pay. When we're talking about a third party or an organization paying, I'm gonna negotiate that rate a little bit differently.
Because my question is really about if what you're talking about is an employer, right? At the fort, for example, $600 for that individual to pay themselves. The question is, would it be better, rather than us to try to do a discount for the individual, would it be better for us to go to a company or the chamber and say to all those groups, if you're interested in purchasing something for any of your employees, please negotiate with us to set that up. And I think that might be the better approach. Because because from a tax perspective, that money doesn't come away from our pockets. If I'm an employer, and I'm focused on retention or attracting someone from a particular area, I think I'll be more inclined as an employer to do that. So
It's worth at least approaching them and seeing if it's something we could do.
And when we first launched VC Go, we had employers bringing off the hook. Trying to figure out like, how can I create an account for my employees, or how can I manage? Our current technology platform doesn't allow us to kind of broker out those services to allow a third party to book for other people. But there are technology options we're evaluating that. Do you have that option?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you're, okay, and I think, because it goes back to one thing I said earlier, right? I hate to offer something then pull it back.
Yeah.
To me, to go this way first, I would think my gut says, go with the approach to the employer first. So that way we're recouping as much of the cost as possible. And then if we pull that back, no one's gonna, it's the employer's problem.
We can do,
Right.
we can do an employer pilot.
Yep.
Yeah.
One with like Ford, another one with like Denso, and those would be the outliers since they're so large. And then have other agreements with the majority, which are smaller companies.
Yeah.
Mid-sized companies, right?
And so I worked on a project like that in Grand Rapids where we did Wheels to Work, and it was employer sponsored. The employee had payroll deduction, that gradually increased to cover the cost of the fare, but the employer subsidized it until the employee passed probation and ensured that they got to work, cleared their probation, and they were able to retain them. There's all different creative solutions that we're happy to create custom solutions for local businesses based on what works for them, but it's getting them to the table that's proved challenging.
And that could work. I'm still thinking about the casino, because we have a lot of people going to the casino. That could be a way of bringing other businesses into the mix by talking about creative passes, to their business.
And again, that's when I had on the fixed route, the sponsorship and partnership opportunities, there is an abundance of opportunities for us to partner with local organizations and businesses, have businesses sponsor routes, have the college sponsor routes. You look at Kalamazoo, Western sponsors a very large portion of the system that serves the college campus, right? So there are all kinds of opportunities. We just think once we get a little bit more momentum underneath us, we can start having those conversations with the local businesses.
I think also a long-term vision that I see, and this was actually tried before Janisha was born. Is,
6 next week.
26.
Dennis Randolph had a bus that ran from Battle Creek down to Michigan Avenue, connecting the city. But he was at the time, it was before the casino, and he was trying this, and he was just ahead of his time. And so instead of running 5 minivans, you run, I'll call it a long haul bus, your max. You could have a route that people would be dropped off by the flex at City Hall or a convenient location, and then you get on that sort of the teletransit style, but
Is it like an express bus then at that
Yes.
point, then going from?
well, it would
Down
stop in
Michigan
each
Avenue.
city at a certain location, and but that way you can get across the county, and you're it just, if you think of what if one person's riding a bus or 30 people are riding the bus, about the same cost.
And once we start operating more across the cities, not in these silos of different agencies doing it, and we have the data, we'll be able to make more informed decisions on what types of service are best suited. So we're not locked into, fixed route only being in the city of Battle Creek and Springfield. That's what we've budgeted for now because we know that's what the demand is now. But let's say we notice, especially as the Blue Oval battery plant gets up and running, we notice that there's a lot of demand to get down the 94 corridor, either from Albion or Battle Creek to Marshall. There's nothing that stops us other than this local body from adding service or changing the way we provide service and adding a shuttle with its own fare structure based on kind of that volume of commuter capacity.
Yeah, we gotta start thinking of like one system versus
Correct.
four different.
Instead of thinking of 4 cities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the biggest question I have on the on-demand is discount fares. As Matt said, the majority of his DART passengers are reduced fare and are used to paying $1.50. BC Go, we don't have any type of reduced fare. And Albion Marshall Connector reduced fare is currently paying $1. So the question is, do we just have one flat fare for demand responsive services? Or do we offer discounted rates for specific populations? Yes, ma'am.
So what would it look like for us to do discounted fares, during, cause the discounted fares, they're only during certain hours, right? Those, move buses only operate during certain hours, like they're not
Yes,
after.
so the RC move would operate during the RC max hours only.
Okay, so with that being said, what would it look like for us to offer those fares to people who currently qualify for those fares in, Marshall and Albion and Battle Creek? It will be the same thing that we already decided, the $3 later and $5 while the buses are running. But I think that could kind of offset the cost to people who are only paying $1.50 right now.
To follow the same
Yeah, fair,
half fare.
yeah,
Eligibility for
yeah,
the half,
the eligibility for it.
use the same.
So it would be seniors, people with disabilities, Medicare card holders, and
Yes.
veterans.
Cause like people who already qualify, that's a big jump to have them paying $1.50 right now, and then now everything is $3.
Matt, do you have any thoughts?
I think it would be a big jump. I mean, exactly what Janeda said. I can't imagine it's gonna be taken very well. But, yeah, I think you need to give them some type of reduced rate.
Now, would you follow the children policy on this too? Like the 5 to 12? Well, we know it's 8 right now.
I think
for
yes,
vehicles,
because-
but 8 to 12?
So-
half rate?
This will be the only mode of transportation, correct? So I don't wanna take what they already have and take it away from them and then make them have to pay more if we don't have to do that.
And that would mean for Marshall Albion, I see the single ride is $2. So if we go with the zone, will that increase their?
That would
fare to
increase it to
$3?
3.
Okay.
Yeah. It would go to $3 and then a reduced fare would go to $1.50.
What
Which would
you're
be
looking
the-
at is going from Albion to Marshall, Marshall back to Albion. I think we're talking about that's gonna go away, correct?
That's not
And we're
gonna be a
we're
thing
present you
anymore.
guys with some models of what it's gonna look like between the different zones. So we're just talking about the specific zones right now.
Right.
within your community. So it'd be $3,
Albion to Albion.
$3.
don't put your
But
finger,
you
move your
don't-
finger
You
over
don't have, this, we're not talking about this right now. We're talking,
inside the city, in the zone.
So say if you're going from North Albion to South Albion,
Right.
$3.
No.
I'm just telling you what.
It's gonna be a difficult.
Make a decision.
I didn't make a
It's
decision.
gonna be a hard pill to swallow. I do
Now-
believe that taking the AMC away will be a hard pill.
Now,
to swallow.
now it's $3 and it would.
I mean, Battle Creek, yes, but Albion.
No, Battle Creek would be $5.
Yeah,
Battle Creek would be
like,
5.
Battle Creek would be $5.
It will be in addition to.
That's what we've said so far. So the $3
but
would be
$1.50 potentially, right?
correct. So if I'm a senior, if I'm a veteran, if I'm, what's the other?
A person with disability.
Right.
That would now be,
It'll
so
be
North
$1.50.
Albion, it'd now be $1.50.
150.
correct?
So it's already currently that, because there is no transportation that goes from Albion to Albion, correct?
Correct,
Like, you
other
can't
than
get-
BC
there's a
Go.
Pilot that-
So
yeah.
it's not like there would be anything different because there's nothing that exists already.
Okay.
I think you're thinking of that's why, the piece that you were looking at.
Yeah.
They haven't come to us yet, the Albion to Marshall connector. All we're talking about right now is
Albion to
Albion to Albion.
Essentially BC Go. So what are people paying currently to get $2?
In Albion, it's $3.
$3, so it would be no different than.
First side of Albion.
Currently.
One side.
But we're saying now if they qualify for those 4 different things, it could be $1.50, so it's
Yeah.
$3.
Most people, excuse me, most people will. So to go from West Broadwell to the dialysis center is $1.50.
Which is cheaper than the fixed route service in Battle Creek.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Say.
You're good? Yeah.
Trout.
Everybody see what you got to do
We have
when you.
we have an AED in the hall, so we'll get it.
I'm waiting for the yes. Last is still no.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
that make sense?
I can
And
understand.
then they're gonna come back to us with the connections between the cities.
Right.
We don't
right,
have that
between
figured
the
out
zones.
yet.
Yeah.
We're just
That's
talking
a
about.
whole
And the only
conversation
one-
another day.
And I think the only one we've exempted so far, we've said Springfield to Battle Creek, we've already exempted because
Yeah.
of that geolocation piece, right?
Okay, yeah.
So what we're waiting for is Albion to Marshall and also one of those 2 zones to
Yeah,
Rouse.
so
Oh,
the combinations.
Permutations.
I don't like that word.
Back to Clark game in the system now.
So for BC Go, well, whatever, RC Flex, it's gonna be the same population that will qualify for the half fares as for, okay.
But that's not, well, my suggestion was that that's not in Battle Creek. Because in Battle Creek, during the time that RC Flex is going, you can ride fixed route service, which
Right.
has those same
Right.
things. So like, we're not gonna reward you for picking RC Flex weekend.
But Marshall and Albion.
Yes,
Okay.
There is no other choice.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it only took 2 hours.
And we have
Mostly I was gonna
we have an 11:15 in here with Maynard Costerison.
Okay.
Some of us.
Yeah, you can wait.
Well, I
So
would need to let them know that if that's.
We might get through the.
Well, I mean, we're
do we
gonna.
think that we could get through this piece quickly?
Yes.
I really do. So I'm starting with Marshall because I think that's gonna be the harder one. This is an example of our current service area for Marshall Dial-A-Ride. The green is the city limits of Marshall, except I don't think it's been updated to include the Blue Oval Island, right? And then the red is what I call the buffer zone, that's a mile outside the city. So when you're looking at the fare chart, in town is the green, out of town is the red.
Okay.
So first order of business for service area is to determine City of Marshall. They're currently receiving service that extends a mile outside the city limits. Do you want to change that?
I can tell you the Marshall City Council wants that red to disappear. Because those townships opted out. That mile is something staff did because one of the drivers had a kid at Marshall Academy. And she started doing it unknowing to administration. And the out of town, that you saw a rate for out of town.
Yeah.
There are little islands, that map really doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't include the areas that have been absorbed now.
Well, there's little islands like right next to the city, you know, so that's what that would be. That 1 mile was never anything adopted unless you found something. And I don't mean go looking in back in archives. The Marshall City Council feel this is pay to play. And they feel that, the citizens of Marshall are paying 2.66 mils and
People.
for
Yeah.
the people, and the people out there in the red land are not paying. We're not forced to service them, but I can tell you from the Marshall City Council, they want to stay within the jurisdictions.
Commercial city council.
Yeah, I'm coming down there.
And if you,
Can I give you-
can you go back one slide? And you can see, now you can see blue, now you can see blue oval there.
Format.
So can I give you the converse to that?
Oh,
The-
always.
You
You knew I would, where I was, you were waiting for me.
was. So the argument that we hear to that is that, well, I'm paying the taxes and that's where I want to go,
Yes.
right? So the question that I have, number one, on here for discussion and consideration is what is in the red area besides residences? What is in the red area that people are trying to get to? Matthew?
Okay.
Well, that's gonna be your, your free range restaurant and a little bit north of, the border there. Pretty much the northwest corner and Marshall Academy are what folks travel to the most. I did look at our last quarter numbers and you seemed pretty disappointed in, having a driver, use a spreadsheet on a bus, but that's leaps and bounds ahead of what I had to pull this information. I literally, but yeah, we're looking at between like 1 and 4 and 1 and 5 trips either originate in the red zone or their destination is in the red zone right now. Without me doing any digging and trying to find anything.
There are,
Always keep what it is currently and charge
For now.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I don't know. See, I'm all in for Battle Creek and I know what Battle Creek is thinking, but it sounds like there's two different things going on here. It sounds like the people who voted for this feel like they only want to service the areas that pay for it. But it sounds like there is also a need for like Marshall Academy, that's a school.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the charter school over here as well as.
they got buses.
They got busted. Done.
I
love it.
Since if they call and complain, I'm giving them time to remember.
Yeah.
I'm out at Marshall Academy, so I can say that first.
Okay.
But, for 1 to 5 rides, for instance, a lot of those rides are going to 3 locations in the township. They're all Oakland Hospital facilities.
Yes.
They are, currently Oakland has approached Marshall Township, say they want to come into the city. And they are ready to move forward. We have the connections between the city, and their administration being a local hospital. Beside those 3 Oakland facilities,
That's
It's
good.
just the restaurant and the academy.
Yeah.
and,
Well,
so.
there's a couple stops out there north of the border, but it's not much. A good majority is gonna be where you're talking about. We do have a couple of regulars that live out on, I believe it's Highfield. There is an adult foster care out that way that frequents Oaklawn. There's a couple of residents of that facility that frequent Oaklawn and a couple of places in town, but yeah, overall, I think Oaklawn is a big.
So if I may, what prevents you from saying, if you are a resident of the city of Marshall and you are paying for service in your taxes already, you have the option to schedule a trip outside of the city. But if you are a resident of a surrounding township that is not a participant in the TAC and you want to service trips from the township into the city or across to another location in the township, that's separate, that's not included in this zone. So you're rewarding the people who have already paid through their taxes, who have that logical argument. And at the same time, you're saying to the people who aren't part of the participating city, you're not going to get the same level of benefit as the people in the city because your township isn't participating. If you want your township to participate, you need to lobby your township.
So is your assertion that so my city of Marshall folks pay the $3 And if I live out by free range or something like that, to get to where I need to go, they pay 5 until such time their township participates.
There you go. I mean, it's,
They're-
that's a model that's been used elsewhere, and I can tell you it works. And it also has brought in townships to become participating municipalities.
So
I mean, it would be my thing, that would be,
that did happen in our service area.
yeah.
Where 3 townships decided to purchase service on a rate because they wanted to be in. There was one exception, and I think that had to do with everybody wanting to go a Meyer store in Plainfield Township. But the transit system, the folks in Grand Rapids said, this is for our residents. They need to be able to get to jobs at Meyer, they need to be able to shop in Myers, so we're not gonna worry about the township thing, because very few people in the township is gonna walk or drive to Myers to get service, so there can be exceptions. But that, at some point, you might face that where you say, well, what is in the benefit for your community, for jobs and for shopping that you need to uphold, because they've already paid the tax, they just need to go where they're working, and it's very close, it's just right there.
Let me ask a legal question for you nerds. Is there anything illegal about saying, we will take you to a commercial establishment, which is what we're talking about here, restaurant, hospital. But if you live there and you work in the city, we don't pick you up? Is there something illegal?
There's nothing illegal.
There's nothing illegal.
So I think what you're saying, those 3 Oakland hospitals, Marshall Academy,
Yep.
and the
Free
free
range.
range. Yeah, if we pick those as like spots where you can get rides to and from, those are the places outside of the boundaries that we're accepting rides to and from. Other than that, no.
Yeah, those would be micro locations.
Yep.
And then anything outside of that would be a increased fare.
I would say not service
Yeah,
to
not
other
at all.
township
Yeah.
residents.
And then we can talk
I
about
hear,
them
I hear
out
what you're
there.
saying, but I like money.
I'm willing to bounce that off.
But again, keep
They
in mind that
won't
$5 is
Yeah.
only 7% of what it costs to
And it's
actually
taken away.
divide.
Or if they opted in.
I forgot about that. I'm
Yeah.
in Tom's camp now.
Yeah.
That's town's capital.
Okay, to the jury,
So what we're hearing for service boundary is restrict it down to the green area, with the exception of the identified locations that people are currently going that are commercial places.
Identified micro stops.
Yes. Yep.
and I need to take the currently out because there may be a business that wants to locate in the township.
Yep.
You know, like Boshears Ford or something like
Yep.
this. But I'm willing to bounce that off our city council and
Yep.
see. You know, they can throw me off this board, so. Yeah.
So
And Mr. Marshall could be the one who, who was running for mayor. They could appoint him.
the
Well, that would be
The-
great.
question would be, is it a pay to play? So do we engage a contractual agreement between Oak Lawn, Marshall Academy, and what was that, Free Range Restaurant, that brings them into participation? Or do we do it because that's where the residents or the users of the system want to go?
I think it would depend on how much we're asking for, but Marshall Academy and Free Range, we could talk about pay and play with them. With Oakland, I feel like that's a necessity for people to be able to get there, and I don't want them to not want to pay for it, and then people can't get there. That's what I'm saying.
You don't think Oakland would be willing?
I'm not sure. I'm just saying I
Yeah.
don't want
Oakland's
that to be the
currently
deciding
paying
factor.
the EMC.
Yeah, they can pay us.
Well, if that's the case, then yes.
Yeah, they can pay us. So, hey,
Actually, I think Oakland, or my friend here, Oakland would like to be in the city because then they have full-time fire and police protection. So it's a
And then they
And
would
then
be
they would
paying the
pay
millage.
Anyway.
And
Yeah.
the person who's working on staff there is my former police chief. Public safety director.
that's great.
I'll work on it.
Yeah, eventually that will become a thing, but I think that what we need to do for this we call it pay to play or whatever, is start there and identify the same boundary issue and engagement that we would in any other region. You get where I'm coming from, because there may be a Marshall dialysis, or not Marshall, Albion dialysis thing.
Yep.
That we need to offer the same thing versus creating, I mean, I said a micro stop.
Yep.
But based on what? You get where I'm coming from, just because you went there?
It would be a
And then
standard.
I'm in
yep.
another community and the dialysis place is right outside the boundary, and I don't include that as a micro stop.
Yep.
It's gonna be a mutiny. So maybe and I don't care what I care, but I don't. There needs to be some transactional fee
Mhm.
to create that micro stop, and then we'll do that. We may have the same thing in Harper Village.
Yep.
We will have the same thing in Harper Village. Now, the dollars may be different, but that's a negotiable piece for them to participate. Does
And our
that make
city,
sense? I just wanna be consistent.
and our city council knows it. We are a separate authority. They have no control over us. But again, we need them in the future here, in a couple of years, when we
Sure.
try to run through a millage
Sure.
again. And we gotta,
Yeah, let me
be
tell you
able to reach
something.
the people.
Let me tell you something. You came in here with the fire that Vivian had about Albion. And so you conveyed the city council's fervor clearly. So, so I was ready to eliminate the red right then. Forget it.
I do think the city council would hear from residents if you took away like the Marshall Academy and
there's, you would hear from a few.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
so
Wasn't a big number.
we will work on that.
Okay.
No,
But I've
thank
been
you.
waiting for 2 hours.
So then
Go in there, Tom.
the piece for
I'm leaving Eric.
the piece for the marketing team that I'm gonna say like kind of our subcommittee will have to work on is how and when to communicate the change to the areas, right? So we'll work with King Media on crafting that communication and the timing of that communication so that people aren't caught off guard when all of a sudden a service they have today isn't there tomorrow.
Matt, can I get a list of those locations for sure?
Yeah.
What they are, and if you can give me how many times, if it's daily or, if it's,
So,
okay, thank you.
so just real quick in 30 seconds or less, I kind of want the board's input before we talk to King Media. I said we, because it's a small subgroup. And I'll just throw this out there. In my opinion, I think that communication timing should fall in line with when we change when the new vehicles hit the road and there's a visual difference in terms of operations vehicles and so on and so forth. And we'll be introducing X, Y, and Z. Along with that comes this other caveat. That's if I had to sit here in front of King Media today, that would be my personal.
They're on the call.
Yeah, well, I mean, but
Yeah.
that would be my personal opinion in terms of that kind of timing before we go into that meeting here on Friday, right? So what do we think about that? Because there's gonna be there's an opportunity once you see a move, a flex, and a max skinned in a certain way.
It'll be easier to digest
Yeah.
the transition, I think, once there's the visual to go along with it of like, it's not this exact same Marshall Dial-A-Ride vehicle that was served me yesterday and now it can't serve me today. No, now it looks like a whole new vehicle.
Is that in conjunction with the designee status changing as
Right.
well? Those things would all kind of happen in a similar timeframe.
And just because, so I'm gonna say the designation, yeah, we're looking to October 1st for the formal designation for the authority. But you can kind of set this timing as you see fit. So it doesn't have to be October 1st. It could be, hey, we're gonna give notice on October 1st, but make the change effective January 1st so people have time to find alternative transportation. Or so that townships have an opportunity to come and participate.
Or they can start sharpening pitchforks and filling oil lamps
Yes.
for the mutiny.
So
All of those
we'll,
things will be reality.
we'll We'll engage King Media on kind of the communication plan for a reduction in service, right? That's communicating that the Marshall area is gonna shrink. The next one is the city of Battle Creek. My professional opinion would be that we don't change the service boundaries of what exists today. We currently serve portions of Bedford, Emmett, and Penfield townships. Those are places, the reason we serve those is because that is where the Battle Creek residents want to go.
Yes.
So the family fairs, the Save-A-Lots, the Walmart, Meijer,
Yes.
that is where the majority of our people are going.
Mhm.
And that's why those routes got extended out there.
What's in Bedford?
Family fair?
That's
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Bedford.
Penfield.
No, there's a family fair.
No, there's a
in
family
Urbandale.
fair past.
There's the one
Bedford
right
Town.
in Michigan, then there's the one on
I've been.
Capitol.
It switches like right there, I think, at the line.
Bedford Township is Urbandale,
It
Bedford
does.
Township,
Mhm.
is that, yeah.
So that's Family Fair down West Michigan,
Yep. and then
Northeast
Capitol.
Capital, Family
And
Fairs,
that's as far-
Penfield.
We only go as far as McDonald's, so we're not going
Yeah.
into Bedford a lot. We serve that plaza to like McDonald's. That's like where we're coming back.
Okay.
And the only implication there would be that that paratransit service exists, so it could potentially make some Bedford Township residents eligible for paratransit services.
If
So,
they're ADA certified.
correct, if they meet the eligibility requirements for ADA.
That's right.
So that's the only implication of doing that. The only way to get around that would be to pull your furthest bus stop 3/4 of a mile in so that that boundary, that buffer doesn't go beyond there. I wouldn't,
I don't wanna make that inconvenient.
Yeah.
for-
Yeah, you know, yeah, no. I can't
And
listen.
to certify for that, again, it's the people who do not have access or cannot get to a fixed route bus. So it's people who need transportation.
Yep. Okay,
so my recommendation here, like your primary destinations outside of the city limits are gonna be those shopping centers, and that's primarily as far as we go. So like we turn around and come back at Meijer. We're not going past that. We're not going out to the zoo.
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
Mhm.
So how different is that Bedford scenario from free range?
The difference is fixed route versus door to door.
The expense of the
Transportation
service.
transportation is transportation.
So
I'm a regular person,
The fixed route is the big buses. The big buses are already, they have their stops.
right?
The paratransit goes 3/4 of a mile out past that, so we have to serve that legally. Free range, we're talking about the minivans, so you're requesting a ride from a place to a place.
I got it.
People,
but it's still-
people view them as distinct services based upon the kind of equipment that picks
Okay,
them up
there
on
is that-
roads.
So we're saying that's
Yes.
a distinct delineation
Yes.
in terms of how
There
people
won't
look
be
at
the
it.
big buses.
In the
I'm-
mode.
I'm looking at it as you cut a deal with these folk over here, but yet, you know, you're giving it up, you're giving it away over here.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
To me, it's the delineation of the modes.
You
That's
see,
how you'd
you see a
answer that
large
question.
bus coming, that's the large bus system. You see a little flex bus coming, that's a different system. That's, it may be the same company, TAC, but actually the systems are very distinct. And that's how people see them. They don't visualize the complexity of it.
Because if you remember, a lot of people didn't even know that BC Go was Battle Creek Transit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They did not.
Yeah,
I did
I,
not.
yep, I get that. I'm just playing devil's advocate as I look at one system. Why in one part of the system are you doing one thing? In another part of the system, I'm taking it, because we're still talking municipalities as your answer.
And
You
remember,
hear where I'm
that's
coming from?
only service during fixed route hours too, where if we start talking about the demand response hours and extending those to midnight and adding weekend service, that takes away Bedford Township, cause that's not paratransit service.
So the true answer is between those two areas, free range and Bedford, the need is different.
Yes. In the volume.
The volume is different, the need is different, hence the vehicle is different. But if we start with the basics.
Yeah.
There's a different circumstance for each one of those areas.
To
period.
Christie's point, though, the one thing that we would want to consider is after those fixed route hours, is that still the service boundary? right? Do you still service Harper Village on RC Flex?
Or do you not?
Or do you
Yeah.
not? Do you only service it on fixed route during fixed route hours? Or is that your service boundary for all modes in Battle Creek?
That's consistent with what we said, another part of the system too.
Correct.
So I would say yes.
Yeah, don't take it away.
Now that
after
would make
certain
them
hours.
equal, if you're doing it like that.
I would say that absolutely. See what I'm saying? You're gonna do more runs,
Mhm.
but just because of what's there, but it's even.
And I can
give
tell you,
Peter
I'd
a
rather
time?
pay.
Oh,
Oh,
What time,
yeah.
what time is
Time
it
is it
now?
now?
Right now it's 11:22. I've already told
What
them.
time are you supposed to be here?
No, we're doing it on Teams, and I told them,
Oh.
we were supposed to start at 11:15. I told them we're running behind. But I wanna give them a time, cause they're just.
So 11:35, we'll switch over to Teams.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave by 11:30.
Myra, can you repeat what you're gonna engage King Marketing in the script?
I'm gonna say
describe
40.
Service areas. Repeat that.
so I think we need King Media to help us craft the communication around how the service areas are changing, where they are changing. So, for example, the city of Marshall, having King Media craft some communication to explain the reductions of the service area size. And then obviously do the same thing if the service area in Battle Creek changes.
Yeah, kind of like, hey, Peter, we're making transportation more efficient. This is what we're gonna do. And this is how this works. Send different vehicles your way. We're gonna maximize the volume in other areas and some rate changes will come in effect, but we'll operate as one system and you'll benefit from that.
So did I hear correctly? I want to make sure I process this right. Fixed route serves all the areas we currently serve. RC Flex, the door-to-door service, would be restricted to the city limits or would also serve the areas that fixed route serves. Paratransit, RC Move has to, right? RC Flex. Does it follow the same service boundaries as fixed route? Or does it only serve the city of Battle Creek?
I think that it should follow the same service boundaries as fixed route, with the exception being that like people who use paratransit that aren't in the city limits, we're not serving them with flex.
Yes, yes.
So
Okay.
the flex service can mimic the exact fixed route, no 3/4 buffer,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yep.
so like when it goes to Walmart and Meyer, it's those
That's
two
it.
locations.
That's the final, yep.
So,
RC Max is continuing to use the same boundaries.
Yep.
RC Move is 3/4 outside those boundaries. And RC Flex is the same as RC Max.
Yes.
For the Battle Creek service area, yes.
Yes.
so would you have, if we're doing zones, would you have, would you work with those areas? Would we purchase kind of a satellite location for that vehicle to be kept?
So that's our proposal now.
Yeah.
We have to release the RFP to do the site selection and conceptualization. But the plan now is to have a primary facility in Battle Creek with a satellite facility that's more rural.
Yeah.
That would house some of the vehicles as well as some of the staff.
So for Albion, for instance, that flex would just be left at Vivian's driveway. And then they would drive to Vivian's house.
Every morning, check in
Every morning,
with
check
her.
in with Vivian. Making sure.
Well, Vivian's gonna cover it after 7.
Yeah.
That.
She didn't hear. Okay, given the time, what is the last pressing issue that I can handle in 4 minutes?
So right now, BC Go covers the entire county. Obviously, BC Go has been a pilot, 100% funded by MDOT. I don't think it'll be extremely difficult to communicate this, but we'll need to work with King Media to communicate the transition from BC Go to RC Flex and the reduction of service area. So for example, I'm gonna pick on Albion Township. Right now, you know, we have somebody in Albion Township who's using BC Go to get into Albion.
Hmm.
That will go away. So, you know, working with King Media to communicate the exciting new RC services, but at the same time, you know, some people are gonna lose things. Hopefully that spurs conversations.
Yes.
We have an email into MDOT right now to determine if MDOT wants us to continue. We have some funds that are remaining in that grant. We've asked them if they want us to continue using those for operating and extend the contract for operating. Or if they want us to replace the remaining funds and use it for capital. Or, you know, if we're looking at a combination of the two, do they want us to continue running it as the pilot intended, as a countywide system? Or bring it into the RC service boundaries? So, we'll update you once we get a response back from MDOT, but, you know, either way would work for us. We could use the additional vehicles, or, you know, I would say realistically, we have probably another year of operating in the BC Go budget.
So, just one question. So in terms of advertising, in terms of, making the changes known, will there be an opportunity for those businesses or organizations or whatever to say, you know, before, you know, as of January 1st, you will no longer have service? Will they have the opportunity to maybe negotiate service between now and then?
And that is where I think skillfully communicating, and the timing of that would hopefully trigger some of those conversations, whether it's with a business or a township. And that's where I think kind of phasing in, not necessarily just saying October 1, this is all gonna change, but saying, hey, this is the plan, we're giving you notice now.
This is what you can
effective-
do.
This is what we are planning to do, effective, you know, January 1st.
Especially services that are being withdrawn from the areas.
Do we know if that BC Go person in Albion Township is a senior? Or, yeah, senior, let's leave it there,
You know.
I do not know the age of her.
because then you have community actions.
Right now, we don't qualify for it in any certain way. It's a flat fee. So I don't think we've collected that information from her, but I can check. She calls like every day. So
Okay.
she had 3 trips yesterday, so.
Oh,
Tell her to call her friends. So
Busy.
put pressure on the townships supervisors.
okay, good.
Yes, so the only thing I guess that we would like direction on moving forward is kind of that timeline. You know, there is nothing that says October 1st, the hammer has to come down and all of this has to happen. What is your vision for the transition or the timeline for phasing these changes in from fair to service area?
I like your scenario of starting to communicate just before the designation happens. The designation can happen, we let all the areas know we are now the designee. And during that time period, we've given time for discussion and transition. 3 months, is it 2 months?
3.
3 months. And January 1st, these are the changes that will go into effect. Other than if there's something you want to talk about and negotiate, that's the time to do it. But this is the hard stop on January 4th or 2nd or something like that. You get where I'm coming from? And then away you go.
Okay.
And we can communicate that in that way. And I think that's a nice ease into what have you in King Media's process. Step 1, 2, 3, and 4, just like we did with the millage. And to start prior to the October meeting, so that folks are understanding what's happening.
So my recommendation moving forward would be that we engage King Media when we meet with them on Friday. That's part of why they're on here today, is to be able to help us kind of visualize this timeline and changes that are happening. but also work on listening sessions, providing opportunities for that public input. We will draft as our team, will draft the resolution that you would need for the fare policies and the service changes. But, you know, I think it's worthwhile to say, hey, community, this is what we've come up with. This is what we've come up with for fares. This is what we've come up with for service areas, and have those listening sessions with each community, whether that be at a commission meeting or holding some sort of open house. King Media can help strategize that.
Yeah,
That would-
I like that.
Yes.
All right.
I would like to see next topic, or one of the next topics is enhanced service. That's what we told our voters.
Yes.
That is on my, yep, that is the next workshop will be
Okay.
so we have the budget and the service plans, supported enhanced hours, right? Additional hours of service, additional days of service, and then obviously now the new service type of RC Flex. What we need from you is, as a board, is to decide what is your priority for implementation? Is it days of service, hours of service, frequency of service? So that we can work towards hiring, ordering vehicles, ramping up to meet those milestones.
Yes.
Is that gonna be the first, meeting in August? Is that workshop? Are we, or?
I am hoping so, yes, yep.
We can just put on that planning meeting date. And go from there.
And since you brought it up, Mallory, in our bylaws, it says that the executive director will present to this board a budget. I think it's by August 1st, our first meeting in
Awesome.
August. So, because for adoption, our budget year is October 1.
Doing that at procurement training? Okay.
We'll have that executive-
What? Shocking, they need an executive director.
I know.
You the bomb lady, I swear.
Okay.
One.
Okay, so before we close, thank you very much for, our
Thanks, sir.
next regular board meeting is July 22nd. Before I call the meeting adjourned, we did get, on behalf of the Battle Creek Chamber, we got, little baseball team Battle Jack tickets, for us, for this Friday. So if you're interested in that, I do have a bevy of tickets here, plus we get more from the chamber.
Nice.
So, if anybody is interested, yeah, and then.
I got some too for the cool center, so
So,
tickets all around.
I plan on attending. That doesn't mean that you are obligated to attend, but might be a nice little thing.
Cool.
And then, one thing that we're working on too is, along with the marketing folks, is, some implementing Ride Calhoun swag for the board. And, that'll be coming soon. So,
Awesome.
When is the marketing committee?
huh?
When is the marketing committee? Meeting?
Friday.
Fridays.
You do.
Oh, is it Friday?
Yeah, it's on Tuesdays and Fridays.
Wednesdays and Fridays, we canceled the Wednesday.
We did?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we're gonna do Fridays, weekly
This Friday.
Fridays, yep.
This Friday.
Okay, yeah, it's a pretty quick meeting. Especially since Allie's on with us now. She's taking copious notes. And, I plan on being in that meeting for 5 minutes. So, that'll be good. All right, thank you very much. We'll pivot to this Maynard conversation and, kind of go from there. Great job today. We got a lot of.
So that's all your knowledge.
Thank you, guys.
Sitting in both spots, how about you?